Looks like I'm gonna have to come up with another plan here because I went out and checked the tractor today and refreshed my memory and realized that the hole on the back side of the housing where the pump bolts up to is just large enough for the pilot bearing here to go through, and then of course there's an O-ring that goes around the outside of that bearing to seal it. So my problem is that if I install the umbrella seals and the shaft into the pump now, I won't be able to put it onto the tractor unless I take this, we'll call it a gear or a hub I should say, off of the shaft. Then I could install the shaft into the pump, and then I could install the pump on the tractor, but then I'd have to push this shaft, I'd have to push this hub back onto the shaft while it's in the tractor. And I could see myself trying to tap this on with maybe a sleeve around it or something. And I really am not crazy about the idea of putting force on this, because that hub right now is not a loose fit onto that shaft. So I think the better move for my purposes here is going to be to wait until I install the pump on the tractor and then install the shaft. And then once the shaft is installed, I can rotate it to the correct position and then get that gear on. Let me grab the gear. Okay, so here's that gear, and this gear is going to slide onto here like this. Even that's kind of a tight fit. I mean, the theory is that this gear is supposed to be able to move around this. I think this gear is supposed to be able to rotate around this a lot easier than this, so that you can line up the holes as needed. It just seems to me like that's awfully tight. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I clean up these surfaces really well and see how it fits. Alright, so I've cleaned up the surface here on the hub, and now I'm going to do the same to this inside surface on the gear. Alright, so now I've cleaned up that surface. So now let's see what kind of fit that is. Still seems like it's a light press fit to me. Yeah, it's a light press fit. So the problem is, if I go to try and rotate this, alright, so this press fit's not going to work because it's, if the shaft is in the pump, when I go to push this on, if I go to rotate this to line up any bolt holes, the shaft's going to be turning inside the pump and I won't be able to stop that. So I think I'm going to have to mount this gear to its final position on the shaft and then insert this whole assembly into the pump. Well, you know what I'm wishing right about now? I'm wishing that before I had taken these two little bolts out to take this gear off, that I had scribed the mark so that I knew exactly which way this came off. And I thought it would be easy enough to see which bolt holes had the bolts in them, because I expected to see ghosts around where the bolt heads were, but the problem is you can actually see that there are several holes that have ghosts around them, indicating that this pump was probably taken off and put on several times. Maybe they were having trouble retiming it at some point. Not quite sure. Even this hole here, which looks like the most obvious candidate because it's got the cleanest area around the slight little bevel at the mouth of the hole. The one opposite looks like a match, but then the one right next to it also does. And so doesn't this one over here. So that's not really telling me much. There's a slight scratch mark right here. That looks like maybe somebody previously had done what I neglected to do. Problem is I can't find any corresponding marks left on the gear here that line up with that. Turns out I was a little hasty in my proclamation that I had cleaned these parts. It occurred to me that these shouldn't necessarily have to be a tight press fit, and then if they weren't a tight press fit, then you'd be able to rotate and align this up and then insert the screws a lot easier. So I got a little more aggressive with my cleaning. I just used some emery cloth and cleaned that up better, and cleaned this surface up better, and now, voila, when it's on, you can actually rotate this fairly easily. So now if I can figure a way to keep this shaft from moving when I have it in the pump, I'll be able to install my gear and rotate the engine while keeping the shaft steady until I get the engine at the proper timing location, and then find out which of these several holes happens to line up at that spot and insert my bolts. So I think that's the plan. I was going to soak these in hot water to make them a little easier to install in the shaft, but I just warmed them up instead. They're pretty pliable, so I think I'm going to install them now. So the first umbrella seal has to go onto the shaft with the cup side facing the hub here. And because I've got the hub on, I can't install them from this side, so I'm going to have to get them to go all the way down this way. So start by getting them over the edge here. Tricky part here where I've got to get it past the first groove and into the second groove. I think what I'm going to do is just put a little bit of my lubricant on here. Hey, my battery's dying, so it shut off while I was in the middle of putting these on. So this is how they go on.